The envelope was already waiting on the table when I walked in. There was no handshake. No attempt at eye contact. Just a plain white rectangle sitting there with my name typed across it. So sharp and deliberate it looked like somebody had checked it a dozen times. Daniel did not bother to raise his head. He just said flatly, effective immediately, "Your position is now strategic liaison. Your pay has been adjusted to reflect the change." That was all. No congratulations. No words of gratitude. Just a strange new title I had never heard in my life. And a cut in salary so steep it left me reeling. I did not answer. I could not. Not because I was stunned, but because a chill had already crept across the back of my neck, colder than the air in that room. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 38 years old. Until only a few minutes ago, I was the Senior Director of Aerospace Contracts at Mercer Aerodyne. Just last week, I had finalized the largest deal in the company's history. A $1,250,000,000 order for 5 long-range aircraft from a European conglomerate. It had taken me 8 relentless months to get there. Endless overnight flights. Hours of translation calls. Shady backroom negotiations. Compliance nightmares across borders. I handled every obstacle myself. And I delivered. Alone. I should have been honored for that victory. But instead I sat across from a man who did not even say my name out loud. Only 20 minutes before, I had been standing outside that same office door with my notes in hand, preparing to talk about post-deal logistics. That was when the door opened. Sophie walked out first. She could not have been older than 30. Bright-eyed, springing on her heels like she already owned the floor. I recognized her instantly, ambitious, eager, but completely out of her depth. I had trained her 2 years ago during her internship. Daniel followed right behind her. He was laughing. They shook hands easily like two people who had been working together for years. Confident, relaxed, and in sync. They never saw me standing there. And now here I was, holding a letter printed yesterday, telling me the position I had built from the ground up no longer belonged to me. They had not just taken away my title. They had erased me. Quietly. Cleanly. And a day in advance. I folded the letter, slipped it into my bag and stood up. I did not speak. It was not the right moment to fight. It was the right moment to remember. Every smile, every silence, every name. They thought they were finished with me. But I knew they were wrong. My nameplate was already gone. Not replaced. Not misspelled. Just gone. Where it once read Claire Donovan, Senior Director. There was now only a frosted glass door with nothing on it. 15 years of my life at Mercer. Scrubbed away like it had never happened. I stood there for a long moment, not sure whether to knock or to grieve. That office, my office, no longer belonged to me. An intern passed by behind me, balancing 2 trays of coffee. She paused, glanced at me and asked casually, "Do you need help finding something?" She did not recognize me. I forced a thin smile. "No," I told her. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be." And with that, I turned and gripped the handles of a cardboard box Human Resources had labeled Claire's personal belongings. I walked toward the elevators, down 5 floors, past departments I had not visited since my first years as a junior associate. That was where my new space waited. Not an office. A cubicle. Windowless. Phoneless. Carpeted half-walls and a buzzing light overhead. A tangled phone cord left in the drawer. The air smelled faintly of toner and disinfectant. No nameplate. No welcome. Only a sticky note on the monitor that read, "Claire, I will set you up by end of day." I sank into the flimsy chair and looked around. On the wall across from me hung the freshly printed company organizational chart. Laminated. Shiny. I walked over slowly, praying I might find my name somewhere. I did not. Not at the top. Not in the notes. Not even in the small contributor section. Sophie Harrington had taken my place. Her photo now carried the title Director of Global Strategy Initiatives. Beneath it, the caption read, "A bold new vision for Mercer's global future." I closed my eyes. The pain in my chest was sharp, but it was not anger. It was grief. Grief for the version of myself that had given everything to this company. I had not only been replaced, I had been erased. That same afternoon, a junior assistant from marketing came by, her arms full of folders. She handed them to me. "These are for tomorrow's leadership meeting. Can you make sure Sophie gets them?" I nodded and took them. As she walked away, I noticed one folder had a page sticking out. It was a printed slide deck titled, "Contract Finalization, Munich Team," led by Donovan. My picture was there. I remembered the day it was taken, right after the signing. We still held champagne glasses in our hands. But across my face, someone had drawn a thick red X with a marker. The updated slide showed Sophie's name and her headshot in my place. I went back to my cubicle, opened the file cabinet, and flipped through the binders inside. I had built every one of them. Organized. Color-coded. Notes from every stage of negotiation. But now, every tab that once carried the initials NV had been scratched out and replaced with L.M. Donovan was gone. Sophie Harrington stood where I had once been. Her initials scribbled in pen across contracts that had cost me months of sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. I closed the drawer quietly and sat very still. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just let the silence settle in. The worst part was not losing the office or the title or even the credit. It was how easily they had done it. And at that moment, I understood something cold and heavy. If they could erase me this quickly, it meant they had never planned to keep me in the first place. For 8 months I had not slept. I counted the hours. From the first email at 3:20 in the morning to the last video call that wrapped past midnight in Munich. I alone had held the billion-dollar deal together. And now, as I sat in a cubicle staring at binders marked with someone else's initials, I realized the truth. They had not forgotten what I had done. They had erased it on purpose. They never once tried to understand what I had given up for them. There were nights when I sat on the floor of some layover hotel in Frankfurt, poring over engine specifications while my eyes burned from jet lag. There were mornings when I pulled my blazer over a hospital gown just to take calls from Zurich after collapsing from exhaustion and dehydration. And I remember one December, only 2 days before Christmas, sitting in an airport cafe with my mother's video call flashing across my phone screen. I let it ring out. For the first time in 17 years, I missed our annual dinner. She told me she understood, but the disappointment in her eyes gave her away. I gave Mercer everything. Every hour. Every sacrifice. Every piece of myself. 3 months ago, Avionics, our fiercest competitor, offered me a position leading their global strategy team. They dangled stock options and influence. I turned them down without hesitation. "I am loyal to Mercer," I told them. Then I closed my office door and went right back to work on the contract that had consumed me. That deal was more than a contract. It was my lifeline. My legacy. I shaped every clause with my own hands. I combed through every risk assessment. I studied cultural subtleties that could make or break negotiations. I even caught errors the legal department missed. But the most important piece was something only I knew, Clause 47B. That clause never came from the standard draft. Legal had not written it. It was born in Paris during a quiet dinner when the client's chief operating officer leaned toward me and said, "We have been burned before. We need assurance. If you are not the one leading the implementation, the deal is dead." So I wrote the clause myself in plain words without telling Daniel or Sophie. Operational oversight shall remain under Donovan. In the event of reassignment, the client may void this agreement. The client signed without hesitation. We toasted with champagne. And now that very line, the one I had slipped in to safeguard their trust, stood as my only shield. Hidden in plain sight. Ignored by people too arrogant to realize I could not simply be replaced. I leaned back in my creaking chair, fists tightening beneath the desk. Not from rage but from resolve. They believed they had stolen the deal from me. But I knew the truth, I never gave it away. The strange thing about betrayal is how it echoes backward. Sitting in that gray cubicle, staring at contracts where Sophie Harrington's name was stamped over mine, my mind went back to the one moment in those endless months when I truly felt seen. And it did not happen at Mercer. It happened in Munich. The final stage of negotiations had driven everyone to the edge. The legal teams were battling over jurisdictional clauses. The engineers kept shifting specifications halfway through. The client's board was growing impatient, ready to walk. The deal hung by threads invisible to everyone but me. Then, late on a Friday night, my phone buzzed with a message from the client's chief executive officer, Victor Orloff. Dinner. Just us. No agenda. 7:30. Schumannstrasse. I hesitated. Drafts were still unresolved. The pressure was suffocating. But something in the way he wrote told me this was not about paperwork. I arrived at a quiet wood-paneled restaurant tucked near the Bavarian State Opera. He was already seated. No assistants. No laptops. Just a glass of red wine and a neatly folded napkin. I wanted to speak with you off the record, he said. Not as executives. As people. I stayed silent and listened. He told me about their last aerospace deal. A billion-dollar contract that collapsed midway because the negotiator was suddenly removed. No explanation. The replacement had no context, no credibility, no connection. It cost them 3 years and half their reputation. Then he looked me directly in the eyes. Claire, we are not signing with Mercer. We are signing with you. If you disappear, the deal disappears too. In that moment, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not recognition. Not performance metrics. But trust. Genuine human trust. I promised him I would see the deal through beginning to end. When I returned to my hotel that night, an envelope had been slipped under my door. Inside was a short handwritten note in careful cursive. To the one who earned our confidence through action, not title. We do not forget those who carry weight with grace. M. Orloff. I tucked that letter into the back of my planner, behind business cards and boarding passes. Nobody at Mercer ever saw it, and if they had, they would not have cared. Now, sitting in that gray silence with my initials erased from every binder, I pulled out the letter again. The paper was creased but still intact. They could wipe my name off every chart in the building, but they could never recreate what happened that night in Munich. The next morning, I showed up at the office at 8 o'clock, same as always. Nobody expected me to come back after what they had done. Cutting my salary, stripping my title, replacing my name with someone else's. They probably assumed I would disappear quietly, or storm out in anger like most people do after they have been humiliated. But I walked in with my hair tied back, blazer pressed, eyes straight ahead. I sat at that cubicle like nothing had changed, and not a single person seemed to know how to react. Sophie passed me once that morning. She did not speak, just a sideways glance, as if she could not decide whether to smile or look away. I gave her nothing in return. No grin. No scowl. No reaction at all. Across the hall, Daniel's door stayed half open. He had not said a word to me since the so-called reassignment. No meeting, no explanation, not even a half-hearted attempt at a debrief. Once I caught his reflection in the glass. His eyes met mine for a moment then slid away. I did not chase him. I did not beg for answers. Instead, I turned to my computer and started typing. Not job applications. Not farewell notes. Blueprints. One by one, I reached out to people I trusted. Old colleagues who had flown across continents with me. Engineers who owed me more than a few missed weekends. Procurement leads who knew I had saved them more than one deadline. Even 2 former Mercer executives now working quietly at competing firms. I did not ask for favors. I asked questions. Small, deliberate ones. If someone with deep aerospace compliance experience became available next quarter, would that be useful to your team? Are you still managing post-deal integrations yourself? How is the morale on your international group lately? I was not planting seeds. I was testing the soil. That Thursday during lunch my phone rang. The number showed a Washington, D.C. area code. Claire Donovan? The voice asked. It was calm. Professional. Yes, I answered, my eyes flicking to the screen. My name is Julia Bennett. I am an independent contract law attorney. I have been reviewing the Mercer-Urava jet agreement. I sat up straighter. I believe you are the one who authored Clause 47B, she continued. I did, I said carefully. There was a pause and then she said, it is airtight. Plain language. Clear intent. Enforceable in any international court. They have no idea what you gave them. I let out a long breath, part relief, part confirmation of what I already knew. They are blind, she added. That clause was the smartest part of the entire contract, and they walked right past it. That night I stayed late. Not working. just sitting there as the office buzzed faintly around me. Sophie left early. Daniel never came out of his office. I remained in that small cubicle, lit by the glow of the monitor, one hand resting on the drawer where the original contract sat, my ink still on the page, my initials still intact. I gave no warnings, no hints, because real power does not need to shout. It waits, patiently, quietly, until the moment arrives. And they had no idea I still held it. I did not board the flight to France. Sophie did. Monday morning, she strutted through the executive terminal with a first-class ticket in hand. Her blazer was crisp, her new Mercer-issued briefcase polished, the same model I had once selected for high-level travel. The irony was not lost on me. They said she smiled through boarding. I did not wish her luck. I did not say a word, because I knew something she did not. The client's headquarters in Toulouse was a marble and glass fortress I knew inside and out. I had been there 3 times. I knew which espresso in the lobby was worth drinking, which elevator was slow, and exactly how the chief executive officer's assistant liked her documents formatted. By 10:12 that morning, Sophie had already sent a cheerful check-in photo to someone in human resources. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that my name was not only on the signature page. It was built into the bones of the contract itself. The news struck Mercer headquarters like glass shattering. At 4:30 in the afternoon, an email arrived from Urava's legal team. It was short, cold, precise. Per Clause 47B, this contract is contingent upon post-deal transition being led by Ms. Claire Donovan. We do not recognize substitutes. No further meetings will be held. They copied everyone. Daniel, Sophie, legal, compliance, the board. No soft language, no loopholes. And just like that, a $1,250,000,000 handover had no one to complete it, because I was not in France, and no one had asked me to be. I found out about the email when a junior analyst walked past my cubicle, eyes wide, lips pressed shut. He said nothing, but the look on his face told me everything. Whispers spread quickly, across break rooms, elevator rides, even in disguised threads on the company's chat system. Nobody said my name out loud. But they did not have to. The story could not be contained. Word leaked almost immediately. Someone in the communications department had tried to spin it into a harmless little press blurb. A pivot narrative, something light. Within an hour, the draft disappeared. Rumor had it Daniel himself ordered the entire thread deleted and warned the comms team. No coverage, no mentions of France, not a single word. But it was too late. I did not need to be in Toulouse. I did not need to raise my voice or post anything online. All I had to do was wait. And so I did. By 7:45 that evening, I was still at my desk, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours before, watching my inbox fill with unread messages. Subject lines stacked up one after another. Client delay, urgent, need clarification. Clause 47B. The emails were all frantic, all circling around the same question. Did you write this part of the contract? None of them were sent directly to me, but I was present in every sentence. The following morning, Sophie did not stop by. Daniel did not call. Later I overheard whispers that she had broken down crying in the executive restroom. Maybe it was true. Maybe not. I did not care. Because I had done nothing but be remembered. They, on the other hand, had worked tirelessly to erase themselves. And now? They were locked out of a deal I no longer needed to defend. By 9 o'clock that morning, the executive floor was humming with panic. Even from downstairs you could sense it, the hurried footsteps, the muffled but sharp voices, the lack of smiles. I did not need a calendar invite to know what was happening. Daniel had called an emergency meeting while I sat quietly at my cubicle, pretending to type a report no one would ever read. Upstairs, the top brass at Mercer scrambled. Phones rang without pause. The legal team barricaded themselves in conference rooms. Public relations drafted 3 different versions of a press release, none of which ever left the draft folder. And inside the boardroom, the real storm was unfolding. A colleague who still owed me a favor sent me a discreet message. Daniel is trying to blame legal. It's not going well. They were spinning desperately. First, Daniel argued that Clause 47B had slipped through because the legal department was understaffed. Then he claimed the client was simply overreacting, and could be persuaded back with the right tone. Finally, he tried to pin the entire situation on me, saying I had been too involved in the negotiations. That part made me laugh quietly and bitterly. I heard later that one of the board members finally cut through the noise. Margaret Sloan. A sharp mind, known for her precision and calm. She had read the contract herself. Twice. She raised her hand and said slowly, "Let's stop pretending this was a clerical error." I distinctly recall Daniel saying weeks before the signing that Claire was making leadership look weak, that her visibility needed to be reduced. Silence. No one could answer her. I was not in that room, but my absence spoke louder than words. By 2:25 that afternoon, the final blow arrived. An email from Urava. Subject line, contract status. The message was brutal in its precision. Due to unapproved personnel changes in violation of Clause 47B, Urava considers the contract null and void. All associated obligations are hereby dissolved. It was not just sent to Mercer's executives. It went directly to the investors group inbox, to the press relations team, to the private addresses of every board member. That night I stayed late again. Not out of duty. Out of quiet observation. Daniel's door stayed locked. Sophie's office light never came on. From my cubicle I could hear the hallway clock ticking. I watched 3 executives leave without their jackets, one of them with tears in his eyes. Someone from accounting stopped by my desk, hesitating. "Are you okay?" she asked. It was awkward but genuine. I nodded. "I'm fine." And I meant it. For the first time in weeks I truly was. I did not feel erased anymore. I did not feel powerless. I had written that clause. I had safeguarded the deal. They had ignored me. And now they were watching everything they built collapse piece by piece. In the end there was no press release. No spin. Only silence, panic, and a void they could not explain away. And I sat in the middle of it. Calm. Uninvited. Still here. It was 9:15 on a Wednesday morning when my phone buzzed. I was pouring a fresh cup of coffee when I saw the number, New York City area code. I nearly let it go to voicemail. I was tired of all of it. But something told me to pick up. "Claire Donovan?" The voice was smooth, measured. "Yes. Speaking." "This is Adrian Shaw from AvianX. We spoke a few months ago." I believe the timing was not quite right then. I paused, letting the words sink in. "I remember," I said. "Well," he continued, "I am hoping it is now. I would like to revisit our offer with a few upgrades." I walked back to my desk slowly, the paper coffee cup warm in my hand but already forgotten. Adrian did not waste time. He laid it out clearly. Double the base salary and equity stake, full relocation flexibility if I wanted it. A dedicated floor in their new Washington, D.C. headquarters 3 blocks from Mercer. "And one more thing," he added, lowering his voice slightly. "This was not just our idea. We were encouraged to reach back out." "By who?" I asked. There was a pause. Then he answered. "By Victor Orloff. He called you a non-negotiable asset. Said the deal fell apart because you were not part of it. And he does not want the next one unless you are." For a moment I said nothing. I leaned back in the chair Mercer had downgraded me to and stared at the scuffed corner of my cubicle wall. I remembered what it felt like to be erased, to be reduced to silence, to initials that no longer carried any weight. And now here I was, not begging, not pitching, but being invited. Being chosen. "Adrian," I said carefully, "I appreciate the offer." I told him plain and simple before we got back into the numbers. I had a condition. He did not even blink before answering. "What do you need?" he asked. "I picked my own people," I said. "Every person hired under my division is approved by me. Especially when it comes to post-deal integration. No exceptions." There was a pause. Not as long as before. Then he said, "Done. Anything else?" "Yes," I answered. "There is one more thing." I slid open the drawer beside me and pulled out a manila folder I had been keeping sealed since that night in Munich. Inside was a note. A letter Victor had slipped under my hotel room door. I read it again silently. This time my heart did not race. "I do not just want to watch over the deals," I said. "I want full authority over the entire cycle, from negotiation to implementation to renewal." "You will have it," Adrian replied without hesitation. By the end of that call, I had not agreed. But I had not refused either. I hung up, placed the phone face down on my desk and stared out the window. A flock of birds moved across the sky, right above the glass tower that housed Mercer headquarters. The same building that once tried to trap me and then replace me. It was no longer about payback. It was about rebuilding. About proving what happens when you are not only erased, but you come back as the one name they cannot move forward without. This time I was not waiting for permission. I was the one calling the shots. The moment felt unreal. I sat in a boardroom high above Midtown Manhattan. The sunlight cut through the tall windows, glinting off leather folders neatly arranged on a custom walnut table. The same contracts, the same private jets, the same billion-dollar figures. But this time I was not just present. I was leading. The pen in my hand felt heavier than usual. It was not just about signing my name. It was about sealing the fact that everything had changed. "Ready when you are," Adrian said, sliding the final contract across the table. I looked down at the first page. Total contract value: $1,125,000,000. The client: Yerva Aerospace. Vendor: Avionics Global Oversight. Executive: Claire Donovan. My name was not only written on the contract. It was built into the foundation of the deal. Yerva had been crystal clear in their final draft. Every stage of post-deal operations, from logistics to compliance to client reporting, had to be handled directly by me. No substitutes allowed. They were not taking any more risks, and neither was I. When I signed, I was not just closing a deal. I was reclaiming my place. Not inside Mercer. Above it. I had walked out of that building in silence. I had swallowed the humiliation while they rewrote history with someone else's name. But now I was signing a future that did not include them. The press release went live at 10:30 in the morning. A full-color spread on Avionics's homepage. Within minutes, Bloomberg and Reuters picked it up. Avionics secures landmark jet contract with Yerva. Former Mercer executive leads new era of aviation strategy. I did not check Mercer's reaction. I did not need to. But a message from a friend still inside told me enough. Sophie saw the article on LinkedIn during a leadership meeting. She froze in the middle of her sentence. Daniel read it half an hour later in his private office. Neither one of them had known. No memo. No whisper of a leak. Just a public reveal they could not reverse. There was no phone call. No message. Not even a polite congratulations. But I did not need it. I was not looking for an apology. I had the proof on paper in ink and across the headlines. And the only thing more satisfying than recognition was the quiet fact that the very person they had erased had replaced them. Me. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped out onto the top floor of Avionics's new Washington, District of Columbia headquarters. Marble floors, walls of glass, and soft track lighting guided me down the hall. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my new card. Claire Donovan, Chief Global Officer. 3 months ago, my name had been scraped off a door. Now my name was no longer just on a business card. It was carved into the very strategy that would steer an entire industry. On the way to the boardroom, I walked past a glass lounge with a television mounted on the wall. The sound was muted, but the ticker across the bottom was loud enough in its own way. Mercer announces 200 job cuts after failed deal. Chief Executive Officer Daniel Mercer steps down. I did not feel joy. What I felt was release. They had once tried to box me in, to shrink me down until I disappeared. But now their empire was collapsing inward, crumpling like a paper crane dropped into water. They had bet everything on keeping me quiet. What they never understood was that silence can be a weapon. It is not weakness. It is strategy. My phone buzzed once in my hand. A message from Sophie. "Can we talk? I think I made a mistake." I looked at the words for a moment. Then I pressed the lock button and slid the phone into my bag. No reply. No explanation. Nothing left to say. I pushed open the boardroom doors and stepped into a room full of executives waiting for me. The atmosphere shifted the second I walked in. In my hand was a new deal worth $3,100,000,000. A global supply and service agreement. Just like before, one clause stood out, written in clear language. All operations must remain under the direct oversight of Claire Donovan. When I sat down at the head of that table, revenge was not on my mind. Legacy was. Not the kind they print on glossy brochures. The kind that echoes quietly, in rooms where your name has more power than any title ever could. If you have ever been passed over, underestimated, or replaced by someone who never carried the weight of the road you built, then you already know what this moment feels like. And if you survived that storm, then hear this. You do not need to shout to win. You do not have to fight dirty to rise. Sometimes the strongest comeback happens when you keep your mouth shut, pick up the pen and sign it all. Every story lasts as long as someone remembers it. Your mark on this one is a simple gesture. A like leaves your trace. A subscription carries you forward to the next chapter.